And without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to John. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for coming in today. Thank you to our live stream attendees for remotely monitoring this presentation. What we're going to talk about today is saving and investing. And there's really going to be three parts to this. I'm going to talk for TIAA, just a little bit about myself. Then there's going to be heavy audience participation. Okay, so we're going to start with questions and answers. I'm going to ask the questions, you're going to give the answers. There'll be no test. And then we're going to talk about some of the technical elements surrounding saving and investing that you're probably here to learn more about. So to tell you just a little bit about TIAA, we are a large financial services organization. We're almost 100 years old. We historically have worked with nonprofits, universities, and medical organizations. So we pretty much provide retirement plans and endowment and foundation investment management to every nonprofit in the country, larger nonprofit as well as small nonprofits. I work with senior university faculty and nonprofit executives who are closer to retirement. So I work a lot with people that are sort of on the other end of the savings spectrum from where you guys are. They're realizing all of the virtue of their saving because they're thinking about stopping work in probably 5 years or so. I also work with nonprofit organizations, their endowments and foundations from an investment management standpoint. So we handle cash management, we handle investment management for those organizations. So let me ask you, just by show of hands, who is saving in some fashion right now, sort of in a structured manner? So, okay, so a good more than half of you, which is terrific. Are you saving into a retirement plan or in a bank account? Who's saving into a retirement plan? Okay, and is it a TS&E retirement plan? Okay, some of you are. Okay, that's terrific. Yvonne, you and I haven't talked yet, but if you don't mind, your name badge is big, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit how you started making contributions to the retirement plan?
My mentality on it was if I never see it, then it won't hurt when it just automatically leaves my check. So I signed up from the very beginning. So I don't actually miss the money that is being taken out.
So as soon as you started working? Mm-hmm. That's great.
Yeah.
What sort of put you in that mindset? How did you know to do that?
I had signed up for one previously at another job, and I just thought it's the responsible thing to do, I guess. Yeah. I don't know. Didn't think too much of it. Just thought I should actually do it.
Okay. How about somebody else who's putting money into the retirement plan or saving? Who else? Who else raised their hand? Come on, don't be bashful. Come on. Julia, sure. Same story, right? Somebody told you it was probably a good thing to do. All right, so how about for you folks who are not doing that? Why not? Who's going to volunteer? Because we can all learn from, we want to be able to learn from one another here. So it would be great if we could just sort of hear from you guys. And we do have how many people? 15 people on the live stream too that are not able to interact. So you guys are a little bit on stage. You're going to be my assistants here for the people on the live stream. How about folks that aren't saving? It's complicated? What are some of the reasons? Cash flow. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about that. What do you mean when you say that?
Having to stick to a strict budget, maintain a certain level of cash flow that then hopefully can be used later on to investment, but not being able to do that part of it.
And how do you know?
Just based on the budget, on your budget.
So do you go through do you have a pretty detailed budget? Okay, and there's not room yet. Excuse me. When do you sort of foresee when there might be room for you to do it?
Personally, very soon. I mean, I have to wait, to be employed for a year to be able to start any of those benefits anyway. But then starting like next month, probably will be able to.
Oh, so next month. Oh, so that's terrific. So you're all teed up. That's great. So you've gone through your budget, you know you've got some room, and then you're going to have access to the retirement plan. Are you building up money in a bank account or anything like that in the interim? Okay. So tell us a little bit about how, your sort of mindset going into that, so planning to do that. What were your thoughts around that?
Just again, people have said before, it's like the responsible thing to do. It's, to start doing that at a young age so that when you're older, you can have something. Like I know my parents didn't do that, so it's good for me to start doing that.
Your parents did or did not?
Did not.
They did not. Okay. So did you gain some insight because of that? Yep. Okay. All right. So for you guys who are not saving yet, and I know I just asked this, but again, like, is it why not? Is it cash flow? What are some of the reasons why you can't save or you're not saving? Yeah. Okay. Okay, so there's a lot of details that are hard to understand, right? No question. There are a ton of details that are hard to understand. So what we'll talk about later is the importance of getting through all those details, putting all the stuff aside and just figuring out what's important. And the important thing is, like Yvonne said, is just putting the money away because you don't miss it, right? It's a little bit like, if you save, right, we've all got cash flow issues, right? We can all spend all the money we make very easily, right? There's always places for it to go. But if we put money away first, right, then everything else we can just spend, really. That's sort of the secret to it. But we all know that if we don't put it away first and we start spending, at the end of the month, there's no money left to save, right? So that's why it's really a lot easier to do that first. And as Yvonne said, you don't even miss it, right? You just sort of get conditioned. And you save on your taxes. We just did our taxes. The tax deadline was last week, right? For every dollar you put in, you can actually save, like, into a retirement plan, you can save 20%, 20 cents for every dollar. So there's a lot of benefits to doing that. And like Bibusha said, there's a lot of details, and there's the newspapers and the internet, and wherever you look for information, there's a lot of noise, right? Which just gets you confused because everybody wants to capture your eyeballs, right? They want you to sort of be looking at them. But if you just remember to save first, that is sort of the most important thing. And we'll talk about that. Okay, so thank you guys for sharing that. Let me ask you, what are some of the things that you might be saving for? For you that are saving, what are you saving for? A house. Okay, terrific, great. So that's sort of shorter term savings. What else? Retirement, okay. What else? What's that? Traveling, okay, all right. Graduate school, holy smokes, a lot. Okay, house, retirement. Travel, what else? Emergencies. Holy smokes, college savings for a child. What else? Wedding, oh my God, this is like incredible. Okay. Anything else? Dare I ask? House repair. We'll put that under emergencies. How do we save for all these things? Huh? Right? You probably just want to get up and walk out right now. It's so. What would you say might be the most important there? Is there anything that's most important? Okay. Emergencies? What sort of an emergency? Repairs? Home repairs? Car repairs? Okay. So just like having an emergency fund in the bank. Yep. How many people have an emergency fund in the bank? Awesome. That's great. That's terrific. Okay. So that's a little bit, that's a little bit shorter term, right? You're never quite sure when it's going to happen. It could happen at 4 o'clock today, right? So that's shorter term savings, and that's money that should sit in the bank. So if you're doing that, can you save for some of this other stuff too? Who's saving for more than, some of you guys did emergency and retirement. How many are saving for 3 things? Okay, great, awesome, okay. So let's get back to folks. What are some of the reasons that people aren't saving? If I can just sort of focus on you guys just a little bit. What are some of the reasons that you're not putting money away? Is it cash flow?
So, kind of related to that question, but I think the question for me is like retirement, you put that money into a retirement fund. College savings, you put it into a college savings fund. But then everything else goes into your savings account. Right?
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you distinguish how much do you need for emergency? How much do you need for travel? And then how do you allocate how much money should be in each of those funds? And how do you keep track of that is the part that kind of stops me. And
Okay.
put money in the bank, but I have no idea how much, and I don't know how. So, like, if your hot water heater explodes, you're taking that money from your savings account, but how was it allocated for repairs as opposed to for travel or for, that's the part where I kind of get stuck.
So that's a really interesting question. I don't know if you guys remember, but 30 or 40 years ago, right, they used to have this thing at the bank called the Christmas Club. And you would put money in all year so that parents could get presents for their family, right? And that was a segregated account, so people mentally, right, would say, okay, that's my Christmas money, I'm going to spend that in, November and December. So that is one way to look at it. Now, you don't really want to open 5 different bank accounts, right? You don't want to do that. But, we can put nicknames on our bank accounts. And the reason I'm asking you these questions is because a lot of this stuff is just mental, right? It's just how we look at it. It's not that complicated if we look at it in the right manner. So if you've got, your savings account, right, at the bank, and you say savings/emergency, then you know what that money's going to be used for. And then you can do the mental accounting, as we call it, and you say, okay, how much does a water heater cost? $3,000, a lot of money, right? But other things too, car repairs, right? So then you can sort of say, okay, if I've got X amount of money in that account, it's probably good for an emergency fund. And when I need it, I'll know what it will cover, and I don't necessarily have to add more to it. So then you can really go on, and a lot of these things are short term, right? House, grad school, travel, emergencies, college tuition's longer term, wedding is probably shorter term. So the issue is that with the shorter term money, you pretty much have to put it in the bank, and we know we don't get a whole lot of interest on that today, right? But for longer term money, if you invest it, and we'll talk a little bit about sort of what investing means in a little while, but you invest it and you get a really good rate of return over time. So we call it compounding interest, but you basically see your money in the bank double over a certain period of time, which if you run that out sort of 25 or 30 years, you put money in today and it can really grow over time. So we're going to talk about that. And that's why it's a lot of a time issue. So it's important to start putting a little bit in now, and then it will grow a lot at the end. So we'll talk about that. Okay. Question: has anyone attended one of these sort of workshops before on this subject? Okay. So let me ask you, what are you hoping to get from this different than maybe what you got from the last workshop? Tips? Yep. Okay. Some information. Yep. Okay. So during this presentation, what I'd like you guys to think about is what you will do differently when you leave here, okay? Hopefully, some of you will explore whether you've got a retirement plan at work and whether you can put money into that, okay? Or you'll think a little bit differently about your budget, right? Maybe putting money into a bank account first, into a savings account or an emergency account. Just sort of mentally, how you go about your financial sort of chores, and whether you can go about them in a more a beneficial manner going forward, really. So I'm going to ask you guys at the end what you think you're going to do different, because if you don't have one step that you're going to take, then I haven't really done my job very well, okay? So I want you guys, if you would just keep that in mind, that would be great. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that, definitely. Yep. What else?
As far as knowing what to put in your savings account and what to leave in the checking account, just I think like I end up just leaving it all in my checking account. I don't spend it all, but it's not the same as like setting
Okay. Okay. Okay, what else? Yep. Yep. How to prioritize the various accounts that you can end up with. 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, 403b, all of that. Okay, yep.
Can you talk about, I think the Bush was talking a little bit about this, but like as you move between employers, what to do with the money you've already set aside in retirement accounts for former employers as far as like rolling it over and those sorts of options?
Okay, yep. Okay, so
Because we've changed jobs a lot.
okay, what to do with your old employer's plans. Okay, yep. And then you asked about apps and you know how those are relevant and valuable and all of that. And you asked about sort of savings account versus checking accounts. Okay, terrific. What else?
The difference between like employer-offered accounts and ones that I create like on my own.
Okay. Okay, yep. So who, just raise your hand. I know you guys are saving into retirement accounts. So all you guys that are saving into an employer retirement account or know that you do have a employer retirement account, raise your hand. You've got access to one. Okay, so pretty much everybody has access to one. Some of you are not saving into those. Okay. Okay. Okay, all right. So, all right, I'm just going to make just a quick comment on the questions that you've just asked. I've definitely found in working with younger people, sort of people your age versus my age, right? That, you know, I'm serious about this, that all of these details sort of cloud the issue, right? The saving account versus the checking account, you know, what's the difference in the interest? Like, I don't know, like not even 0.5%, right? So that is less important than how much money you have in those accounts and how much money you're putting into those accounts, right? It's you know, when we, you know, I tend to work with people that, you know, are well on their way sort of financially. And we say to them, you know, unless you have like X amount of money, all of the other questions are just secondary and tertiary to your situation, right? It's all about like saving money. It's like a house, right? Unless you've got enough money for a down payment, I mean, you know, the realtors are sort of like, well, you know, here's the listing, or the banker, right? The mortgage person, like, well, come on back to me when you've got a down payment saved. It's sort of the same with this. And so what I would definitely suggest if you guys are, and this is a pain, I totally understand, like nobody likes to do this, except after a couple of years, when you see that you have like $25,000 in your retirement account, you're like, whoa, I got some money here. This is good. I see how this works. But getting there is just drudgery, right? Like, how do I save money? How do I not go out on Saturday night instead save money? All that other stuff. But it is really, really important to take that first step to save, because without the savings, all of the other questions are somewhat irrelevant. Acorn is great, but you know, if they take 15 cents of every dollar that you spend on coffee, at the end of the year, it's like $20. You know, it's not really, but they make it sound great, right? The ads on the radio, like, this is going to bail me out. It's not, right? You know, and you spend time getting the app and the password and all this, setting it all up. And then what? You're like, oh, that's a drag. So, but the retirement accounts, right? Because you get, this is where your money comes from, right? Your salary, right? So you can peel off a fair amount of money. Now, not everybody can take a lot of money, but if you take $500 a month, if you can do that, after a year, that's $6,000. And it's like Yvonne said, you haven't, I mean, $500 is a lot, but it hurts a little bit, but you get used to it. But you know, it's $6,000, and then after 2 years, it's $12,000. 3 years, it's $18,000, right? $18,000 in 3 years. You know, so you guys who haven't started contributing to a retirement account, think about 3 years ago and what you were doing, right? And sort of maybe the time that you could have been putting money away and you haven't. Because as we all know, right, 3 years in the future is going to come really, really fast. Yes? You're losing money. Okay, so that's a problem. I'm sorry, you're behind the post, so you're... Okay. So it's probably going to be easier for you to just move it. Is that like the TS&E umbrella? Okay, so I probably just roll it in there, because into your current retirement plan. Is this from someplace else, or yeah? That's what I would do. It's less paper. You know, it's... Okay. Okay. Yep. Here's the thing. It's the details, right? You got an investment that's losing money. It's losing $75 a year, however much it is, right? And you're sort of getting bogged down in a $5 fee. Here's what do you have a retirement plan with TIAA? Okay, so you got a statement, well, I guess sometime this month. Okay, I would just call your current retirement plan provider and explain to them exactly what you're asking and say, can I put this with my current money? That's what I would do. What's that? Okay. Okay. You could, but not to get too sidetracked here, fewer accounts is better. So the less stuff... Okay, then I would call them. Yep, I would call them. Yep, yeah. It's a little bit more specific. I'm sorry, I neglected you. Yep. Yep. Okay. Yep. Thank you for that. And you're absolutely right. I mean, it gets back to your question, Nora, about sort of the buckets, because that is a way that you can, at least from a savings standpoint, right? It all goes into your bank, but you've got to sort of categorize why it's going in there. So that's, yeah. And it keeps a running total, sort of, yeah, which is great. So that's a great way to do it. Yes? It's not true. Absolutely. Again, the fee stuff is important. You got to be aware of it. You have to be aware of really high fees. But again, you can't let that sort of get in the way. You can't let that get in the way of saving or even investing, right? Some people, keep their money in the bank because they don't want to pay fees. Well, they're paying a fee by reduced interest. So, I'm happy to talk to you about fees, but
More so like comparing two different accounts with two different interest rates versus not saying not saving versus saving.
yeah.
More so comparing two different accounts.
Well, yeah, and when you get there, right, when you start making investments, the fees, you should investigate what the fees are, so you can see, less than 1% or 0.5% is probably a typical fee. So anything above 0.5% for an investment is going to be on the expensive side, and I think they can go quite high over that. So, that's the answer, sort of 0.5%. Now, if you want something that is, a 0.1%, well, you just have to sort of, they're out there. You can, fish around and find those. But is that really going to make a huge difference on $10,000? How much is that? $50? You go from 50 to 4. You say $40. $40 is a lot of money, but don't let it, distract you from the fact that you should be saving and growing and that sort of thing. There's a fair amount of literature out there that talks about fees being of primary importance, and that's not true. It's not true. It's easy to understand, right? We all like to buy things that are on sale versus that are overpriced. Absolutely. But is it the only thing? It's not the only thing, and it's not the primary. There's other things you have to look at. But if you're comparing apples to apples, sure, you want to buy something that's lower cost than something that's not lower cost.
I think what my original question was trying to get at is like, what are some red flags that you should really be looking for? Like if the fund is asking you for 10% upfront for an actively managed or some actively managed money versus some of the other fee structures out there.
Well, you have to you do have to do your homework. If somebody's asking for 10% up front, I'm not even sure that's legal. But 0.5%, right? If you're sort of in looking at that detail, it's 0.5%. But let's maybe just get back to sort of retirement plans and sort of more conventional vehicles rather than individual investments. With a retirement plan, the retirement plan, your employer is subject to certain regulations, and one of those regulations is that there can't be extraordinarily high-priced investments in the plan. That's generally the case. So if you're investing or saving through a retirement plan, you're pretty much going to have lower cost investments in there. But again, you have to remember, you guys are, when you contribute to a retirement plan, you get a match, right? You guys getting which is phenomenal. So not only do you get the tax savings, you also get a match. So for you guys who are not contributing to your employer retirement plan, take a look and see if there's a match there, because that's sort of money that you're as we say, you're leaving on the table, and that's a huge incentive to do it. Yeah.
I once heard, and this may
So that's a good question. That's a good question. I would go to your benefits administrator and ask them. Yeah, yeah. So it can, yeah, it can happen, and that's a risk, right? But it's only the match. It's not, they're not taking the money you put in. They're just taking the money that they would have given you had you stayed on as a loyal contributing employee, but you decided, or some, we decide to leave. So they feel like, you know what, we're going to take back 1 year's worth. It's typically not, it's the amount of money that you contributed that year. It's not, if you've been there for 5 years, it's not the other money that they have contributed. So you got to look at sort of the definitions, and those are changing. But in fact, most companies don't do that. They will allow you to take the money. Yeah, So again, it's sort of there's a lot of stuff written, a lot of spoken, all of that. But it really is about sort of watching your accounts grow in value, and that is really that's what we can control. You can control. It's not the employer or somebody charging high fees or anything else. It's what you've got in your power. Let's. Are there other questions? Oh, that should do it. No, here. No, okay, this has been great. Why don't we'll switch over to get to some of the questions that you guys are asking about the more technical stuff, okay? Okay. So, okay, we've covered a lot of this stuff. Okay, so take advantage of employer retirement plans, start saving. All of this we've just covered, right? Okay, so this is interesting. So what this means is if you put money into, this is an investment account. So let's say you put $10,000 into an investment account today. In 8 years, you'll have $20,000 if you do nothing but just let it sit. Okay, it's called the rule of 72. This is your money growing at 9%. But let me just show you something different, actually. Hold on 1 second. So this is, you guys can see that. All right. So what this shows putting $5,000 a year into a retirement account or any sort of account. Putting $5,000 in a year for 20 years. So the blue line represents, $5,000 a year, totals $100,000 that's put in. But what you end up with is $200,000. So that is the money that you've put in doubling over 20 years, okay? So that's why it really pays to start putting money in now, because the longer it sits there and earns 5%, I think this is 5%, 6%, the greater the likelihood it's going to grow, right? You see how this is, it's going up at a much faster rate. So if you run that out another 10 years, where do you think that's going to be? Remember the rule of 72, right? Doubles every 8 years at 9%. It's 200,000 now. If they stop putting money in, it could be worth $400,000 in another 10 years. Now, granted, that's 30 years, but that's a really good deal. You put 100,000 in and you end up with 400,000. It's like magic. That's without the employer match. That's just, anybody putting $5,000 in. Right, so if you get an employer match on top of that, it's extraordinary. That's why really, I've been saying that it's just important to get the money in there, and the fees, at the end of the day, you're going to probably pay average fees, what have you. But without the money in there, it doesn't matter. And that's why I'm sensitive to everybody talking about fees, because they don't talk about the fact that you got to have the money to sort of take the fees from. So, questions, comments? Yeah. Well, just so if you put money in the bank, right, 5,000 times 20 is 100,000, right, and maybe a little bit more with interest. So that's money in the bank, right, that's not earning much interest today. But if you put it into, what is a mutual fund, and we'll talk about that, in a retirement plan, right? That's sort of the other way that people typically save for longer term, right? College tuition, retirement, that sort of thing. Then they can get 6% on that money. No, it's not. It's not. But it does average out. So and this is a simplified representation, no question about it. But 6% is pretty conservative. Yeah, it is. What's that? Excuse me? 6 to 9? Yeah, I think 6% is sort of a better expectation, because you're going to have a diversified mix of holdings and that sort of thing. 9% is a little optimistic, I think. But 6%, I mean, that's, over 10 years, that's 60% on the money that you've saved. It's extraordinary. No, it's not guaranteed, but it's not guaranteed, but what is guaranteed really? Let me just sort of show you something here. What's that? So this gets to what you're talking about, right? So that is the stock market. And it starts, what's that? That's 20 years ago? Right? It starts way down here, and it goes up, and it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, and then it goes up. So it goes from 50 to 250, or 225. That's a pretty good deal. If you can, you have to know that things go up and down. But if you're 30 and you don't need the money until you're 65, there's 35 years right there. I mean, it's, yes. Yep. Questions, comments, other questions? Talking about the risk of investments for our live stream audience. That was the question. Oops, here we go, sorry about that. Okay. Let's talk about this exactly. So this is a graph of different types of investments. Now, the most conservative investments are down at the bottom, the government bonds. So those are low risk and low return. And as you go up to the right, you get much more risky. And so if you, has anyone heard of, in your retirement plan, you might have a fund that has a 2040 date, some sort of a date on it. Does anybody have those? Okay. So what those funds do is they're a combination of all of those. And here, let me just, let me go to, here, I'm going to jump ahead quickly. Because I want to talk to you. Who knows about mutual funds? Okay. All right, so let me tell you about mutual funds, because those are typically what you put money into if you don't have money in the bank. And they can be made up of stock, which stock is ownership, shares of stock in a company. So you've got a little piece, if you own a share of stock, you own a share of Google stock, let's say, or Alphabet. So you own a little sliver of Google or Microsoft or Tesla or whatever company. So you own a little bit of that company. Now, if you only own one company, whatever happens to that company is what happens to your share of stock. If you own stock in more than one company, we call that diversified. So if you own stock in Google and Tesla and Ford, you know, those are different type companies, car companies, computer companies, all of that. So typically, those companies are subject to different factors in the economy. So while one might be going up, the other one might be not going up. And we call that diversification because they act differently. So a mutual fund is a basket. It's a fund that everybody puts money into so they can buy hundreds of different types of stock. I put money in, you put money in, you put money in. We all pool our money, so it's mutual. It's mutual money. And then the manager buys 1,000 different companies so that we get all that diversification. That's a much safer way to own stock than buying just one company, which, you know, could go bankrupt tomorrow. You never know. So that's what a mutual fund is. Now, a mutual fund, it can be a stock mutual fund, or it can be a bond mutual fund.
Is there any advantage to putting money in a mutual fund compared to an ETF, which is like, it's across the market, right?
No, detail, Nora, that's a detail. They're the same.
But the mutual funds, you said they're managed, ETFs are not managed, right?
Yeah, yes and no, but
So is there any reason to choose one over the other?
not typically unless you want to trade during the day, which that's a different class. Yeah. It's a lot of detail. You can certainly, if you're interested in reading about that, you can find out all about the differences. It's complicated. So who knows what a bond is? No, people don't know. Okay, so stock is ownership of a company, and if the company goes out of business, you lose your money. A bond, though, is if you buy a bond, it basically means you're lending money to the company. So you've got stock in Google, you have a bond in Google. And if you lend money to Google, that's a pretty nice position to be in, right? Like, hey, I'm lending money to Google. They owe you the money regardless of what happens. So even if they go out of business, the judge is going to say, hey, look, you got some money. You owe the people who own your bonds. You owe them that money. So it's safer than stock, and therefore it's less volatile, right? Doesn't go up as much, doesn't go down as much. But again, if we combine sort of, if you own stock in Google and then a bond in Google, you get that diversification. You've got safety in Google, but you've also got sort of the risk. And so that's what that the chart is that we were just looking at. You see the bonds down at the bottom, and then the stocks up towards the top, because the stocks are more risky. Okay, so if you guys, if you have so let me ask you a question. If you've got money in a retirement plan at work, how did you make the decision to sort of where you put your money? Yep.
The second time I did it, I'm really young, so it has a lot of time, even if I put it in risky investments, it has a lot of time to go up and down.
Okay.
Until I become a retirement.
Yep.
So thinking of putting it in higher risk investments and then shifting it to lower risk investments.
Okay. So which is perfect. Now, how did you know what was higher risk versus lower risk?
I knew that stocks were higher risk.
Okay. Okay, so and that's what we talked about, right? You know, Google stock fluctuates a lot in value. The other vehicle that that you can that you've got in retirement plans now is as you said, these target date funds, where you sort of say, okay, I'm going to stop working in 2040 or 50 or whatever the date is. I'm going to put my money in that fund. And that is going to be somewhat more aggressive. It's going to be more aggressive than somebody who puts their money in a 2030 fund. And over time, it becomes less aggressive as you get closer to needing the money. So for people your age, it's a great, it doesn't take a lot of thought, because what we were finding was that people were not putting money into the retirement plans because it was too overwhelming. Like you said, Nora, the default, like, what do I do with this money? And then they just sort of, they would delay putting money in. So they came up with these sort of mixes that are age appropriate, sort of. And that is a good way for people when you're starting out to just sort of put the money in. Like, when am I going to retire? Okay, that sounds good. And that, like I said, it ends up being a mix of those, all those types of investments. But the further out it goes, the further up on the spectrum it is. It has more risk because, again, over time, they think that everything will get smoothed out. What questions do you guys have? Is this helpful to you? Is this good? No? Why?
I guess because I feel like the questions I have, you're saying they're detailed and you're not answering them, and the things I already know are confusing me. I guess just from where I'm at.
Yeah, okay, all right.
The questions I have is like, is there a benefit to choosing a target date versus sort of doing a similar thing yourself? And it's just like one's more work, but probably lower fees. And so like, I feel like those are the kind of questions I have, but I'm not.
Okay, so, and I don't mean to avoid your question. Thank you for saying that. Those questions are a little bit more specific to your situation, and the answer is sort of, it requires going into the detail. It's not sort of...
What's a good resource for finding that kind of information? How should I go about researching or finding?
You can Google Finance, TIAA, Fidelity, I mean, there's 1,000 financial websites out there.
I guess the problem that I encounter is those are not written very accessibly. It's in language, so like this is presented in a very accessible way, but only goes to like a certain level of detail. And then if I want more detail, it's presented in a completely
That's the problem.
So I guess where do I go to get easily accessible language that's slightly more detailed?
Yeah, that's the problem. So take a look at TIAA.org. I think that's pretty simple. It's intentionally simple. Maybe start there.
Yeah, I don't mean to be a hater.
No. I'm glad you said that. It's complicated, right? Regulations require that stuff be written a certain way. Lawyers require stuff get written a certain way, and you're right. The whole message just gets lost after a while. Yep. I'm sorry about that.
So to kind of piggyback on that, I think, just in terms of like larger financial planning for my family, like we've gone back and forth 100 times around like, should we consult a financial advisor? Like, should we actually work with a professional who can like help us figure out this stuff? Can you just say something about that, like the benefits in terms of the cost of doing something like that to yield long term? Like, what do you recommend? Yeah.
So here's the answer to that. I would say it's definitely worth it to some degree. What typically will happen is you'll go to see a financial planner, and they will learn all about your situation, and they'll tell you, okay, this is what you need to do. And then you've got to go do it, pretty much. They're not going to sort of call your banker and say, or call your employer and say, hey, put, $20 more a pay period into the retirement plan. So you've got to actually do that. And that's where things sort of fall down a little bit, because people go in to see these, financial planners, and they think that just by going to see the planner that everything's going to be taken care of. But there's a lot of work done. But yeah, if you're facing sort of decision, hello, yeah, I would definitely do that. Yeah. And again, they're going to focus on the longer term. Okay, so let's. So this is the same thing that we just saw here, but it's maybe a little bit easier to understand. A money market is like a bank, so that's safer. Fixed income is what bonds are. Those are safer. Real estate's less safe, and then equity is stock, so those are less safe. Now this is very interesting. So it gets to your point about the 9%. I'm sorry, she doesn't have a name tag, but about the 9%. If you look at this, and what's really interesting about this is if you see here are the bonds, right? So we talked about the bonds being safe, and you see that they're always down. Generally, they're close to the bottom. Okay, but they earn a pretty consistent rate of return, right? 4%, 7%, 5% up there, 5% down here, 6%, 7%, 4%, -2. But you can see how that works, right? As opposed to up here, the emerging markets. So what this chart shows is by year, the best performing investments and the worst performing. So you can see emerging markets 32.59, emerging markets 39.78, emerging markets -0.53, right? So everybody loves it up at the top, and they hate it down here. But if you're diversified, right, if you don't have all of your money in that, if you had it in some in emerging markets, let's say, and some in bonds, 50-50, then the returns get averaged out over time, right? So that's what you get in those target date funds, and that is also why you have a diversified mix in your portfolio. It smooths out the rises, but it also smooths out the falls a lot too. Questions, comments? Okay. Not important. Let's talk about IRAs and 403Bs and 401Ks, okay? Who has an IRA? Okay. Everyone, okay, you guys have IRAs, okay. So an IRA, anybody is allowed to put money into an IRA as long as they have earnings from a job. So an IRA is called it's an individual retirement account. Anybody can put money in there versus a 403B, which is an institutional retirement account, and those are administered by your institution, and they require that your institution your employer authorize you to put money into that plan. So you can put up to $5,500 into an IRA. You've got two types of IRAs. A traditional IRA allows you to take a tax deduction on your taxes when you put the money in, just like when you put money into your employer retirement plan. You don't get a match on an IRA because it's just between you and the IRA provider, which might be a bank, TIAA, Fidelity, what have you. But if you don't have access to an employer retirement plan, you can put money into an IRA. You can also put money into an IRA if you do have a employer retirement plan, though you may not be able to take the tax deduction for putting the money in. But nonetheless, it's still a good way to save money. The other IRA is a Roth IRA. So that's an IRA that you don't get a tax deduction for putting money in, but your money's allowed to grow tax-free. And when you take the money out, remember that rule of 72, so your money doubles, right? When your money doubles, you can take the money out and you don't have to pay any income tax on it. So the difference between the two is an IRA, you get a tax deduction for putting the money in, but when the money comes out, you've got to pay income taxes on it. Yep.
So if you're choosing like between these
Yep.
two kinds of IRAs and an employer account,
Yep.
it makes sense to put money into your employer account if you're going to get a match from
Yep.
that. And then if you are in a higher income tax bracket, then put it into a traditional IRA.
Yep. Yes.
Or if you're not, then put it into a Roth IRA.
Yep.
Is that how you would have
Yep. That is. Yep. That's exactly right. Yep. So it's tax dependent, match dependent. A couple of factors involved there. Yep. So like Nora said, if you're in a higher tax bracket, you would put money into a traditional IRA. If you were in a lower tax bracket, you'd put money into a Roth IRA because the tax deduction doesn't mean a whole lot for you. And what a lot of people do is they put money into a retirement account at work, and then they put money into a Roth IRA. The other good thing about a Roth IRA is if you have it open for 5 years, you can then take the money out anytime you want and not pay any taxes or penalties on the money. You can only take the money that you put in out, but it's like a savings account after 5 years. Yes?
So I have a question for the like employer retirement plan. Since it is coming out like taxes taken out already,
Yep.
do you have to pay income tax when you take that money out for retirement later?
You do pay income tax when you take it out. Yes. So you don't pay now, you pay later.
But then so the Roth IRA is the only one where you don't do that.
Correct. You don't, because essentially you get a deduction on the contribution you're making to the employer retirement plan when you put the money in, and then you pay taxes when you take it out. With the Roth, it's the opposite. You don't pay taxes. You don't get a deduction going in, but you don't have to pay coming out. Yes?
If you start a Roth IRA when you're younger or making less, you have to convert it at some point, or can you do that?
Just keep it. Yes.
Talk about the distinction between a 403B and a 401K.
Yeah. Typically, there's not a whole lot of difference between the two. There's regulatory elements to it, but from a user standpoint, there's really not. They're both institutional retirement plans. Pre-tax money goes in. You can put after-tax money in there as well, but 403Bs are typically for nonprofit organizations. 401Ks, they are being used by nonprofit organizations more and more, but the historical distinction was a 401K is for a for-profit organization and a 403B is for a nonprofit organization. Yep. Yes?
So is there any decision that you should make around like putting more money into a Roth account versus an employer one because of the taxes or not? Like should you put more in the Roth IRA because
It's really, it's splitting hairs because you have to figure out what your tax rate is likely to be when you're 65 or 70 years old, which who knows what it's going to be. Yeah, it's, what we really focus on when we counsel people is measuring the likelihood that they're going to be secure financially longer term. And the easiest thing for us to look at, the easiest thing for people to understand is sort of if we go back to that graph that shows the $100,000 going in, we calculate how much money you're going to put in every year, how long you're going to do it, and how much money you're going to have at the end. So that's, again, it gets back to sort of how much you're saving. The taxes, we don't know what the taxes are going to be. They could likely be higher just because the tax rates now are at sort of, they're below like the 100-year average, so they're likely to get back to average at some point.
Are any of those different than a simple IRA?
A simple IRA is not really. There's the types of organizations that do a simple are different than the organizations that would do a 401K or a 403B, but it's typically an organization that will do a simple versus just a regular IRA. Why do you ask?
Well, I work in a financial organization where it's smaller.
Yep.
We were thinking about either a simple IRA or 403B.
Okay, so I think with the simple, you've got a mandatory match, right? 3% match. Yeah. So that is one element that's different. You've got to meet that requirement. So, yeah, I mean, I think the 401Ks are probably more simple to administer. So, yes, did you have a question?
Can you convert a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA?
You probably already know that answer, which is yes, you can. But, yep, you can. You've got to pay the income taxes, though. So typically, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do it unless, if we have somebody who has stopped work and they don't have any income, they're living on savings, like savings in the bank, so they're in a very low tax bracket, then they are the ones that would make a conversion because their tax bracket is really low, so they wouldn't have to pay a whole lot of tax to take money out of that, an IRA. So that's when you would do a conversion, but otherwise it typically doesn't make a lot of sense. Yep. Yes?
The 5,500 per year for IRA, is it for traditional IRA or for Roth IRA?
Both. Yep.
The total equivalent is even.
5,500. You can't do both. Yep. Yep, but you can do a retirement plan at work and then either one of those. Yep.
So it makes sense to have both, like IRA and if your employer offers one.
Yeah, definitely. Yep, definitely. Yeah. And in fact, or you can, I think you can put, no, you can't. You can't do a Roth and a traditional. Yeah. Yep. Other questions? Okay, you guys have been really good. We covered sort of a lot. You guys can take a picture of that slide if you want. That might be helpful. All right, so yes. Ning, will we be sharing the slides? The link, right? Yeah. Yes. Yep. Okay, so let's start, if we're finished, let's just start with Martin and ask Martin what he thinks he's going to do different.
I'm definitely going to call my employer-sponsored plan and figure out my options. Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. I had a plan before where I worked, and I rolled over a lot of it into that, so I have to figure out what the best option is with the money I have there.
Okay. So see if you can roll it into your current plan.
Yeah, or would I be able to move any of that into an IRA?
Yep, you can.
So look into that, but definitely calling them, at least figuring out what's going on.
Okay. Vibhusha?
I'll look into definitely saving for retirement for sure, but I'll have to look into different options and figure out more. 'Cause this is very helpful, but for me, I would want to know in more details about all the options and move forward.
So when will your deadline be?
Starting to save, I'll create another saving account for now, so I'll start saving immediately, like maybe even like if it's $20 per paycheck.
Yep, that's great.
And then gradually looking into other options about all this funding and stocks, and I think that will be an ongoing process forever.
Okay, that's great. Yep, it should be. Yep. You can pass the microphone.
I don't want.
Come on. Come on.
In regards of the mutual fund, because for the 403B accounts that I have with the agency, I would probably try to be more risky than what I'm doing right now. So.
Okay, so that's good. You'll look at that. That's terrific.
I currently have a savings account, but I'm sure like a lot of people, everything is not really broken down. So I'm going to take time to, try to distinguish how much is going to be applied for emergencies and what's going to be towards, saving for a house. And so definitely breaking that down. And I also want to look into an IRA, possibly getting that.
Perfect.
I've been putting off signing up into my employer's plan for a while. I have a retirement plan in another country that I stopped contributing to a long time ago. And so I've kind of been putting it off. But one thing that I want to do is I'm going to start small, but in November I am going to be done paying student loans. So that amount is going to go straight into my retirement account.
Terrific. That's great.
I'm going to get more details on the type of investments I have for my retirement plan, since I pretty much just picked the default, since I seemed a little lost at the beginning. So.
Okay, yep, that's great. Yep, so do an evaluation. That's terrific.
I need to work on rolling over 3 previous employer plans into my current plan, and also researching more about target date funds.
Okay, that's great.
Kind of similar, mostly researching the employer fund we have.
Yeah, I think now I just have more clarity around, like I said, next month when I can start making these contributions, like I'm going to put part of it into my employer to get the match, but also now thinking about like a separate Roth IRA, just to have that balance.
That's great. One more.
All right, so besides my current account, I mean the RA with my employee, I'm thinking about to have one of those. Do you think you can provide us any number of TIAA so that I can call and ask somebody to talk to?
TIAA.org. So if you go there, there'll be a phone number right there that you can call. And you can also, you can see something like this and all sorts of other information that, you know, as we said before, is hopefully user-friendly. That is the intent. Yes, but the phone number will be right there. Yep. I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I appreciate it, and I hope this was worthwhile for you.